Welcome to 23 Degrees Sideways, or welcome back to 23 Degrees Sideways. This is turning into a series of videos. I just talked about the Enlightenment space. Let me adjust that just a touch. And how, you could see the shifts and see some of the changes, going on right now in that space as the authoritarianism of the progressive left unleashes itself on the masses. The last year has been quite crazy that way. And I mentioned that, I'm still in that space. I'm still feeling that, and I'm positive. But the videos have to deal with difficult topics at times. I try to do it with some humor and grace, but the topics are difficult. We're at a point right now where the basics of life are being controlled arbitrarily with no rational basis. No basis that I can find at all except authority. Authoritarianism for the sake of authoritarianism. And we're not doing very well with this. And there's a couple elephants in the room that we have to talk about, especially when it comes to politics. Recently, a stimulus package was passed that was many months in the making and has over 5,000 pages, and no one got a chance to read it. And it was a famous Pelosi move. If you want to read it, you're gonna have to pass it. And it turned out that it's really, really bad, and a lot of people in America are really, really angry. And, what do you do? What do you do about that? There's a lot of frustration that elections don't work, voting don't work, your representatives aren't representing you. But the question is, of course, have you written a letter? Do you write weekly letters? Do you take notes, look at stuff, and just send an end of the week letter to your congresspeople? Because you should. I hate that word should, but this is a case where that's the proper English usage. It's a very good idea to do that for yourself, for your records, as an educated person or an aware person, but also because they do listen, and anyone who's got enough chutzpah to do that is someone who's going to go to the polls and is probably informed enough to influence other voters. So they do pay attention to that. However, there's three elephants in the room that cause that to matter less and less. There's the national party structure. So we had some reforms after Nixon that the electoral reforms had the side effect, I think it was intended, of making the national party structure more important than state and local party structures. So that's an elephant in the room. You have no influence with the national party structure, and that's a problem. That's a very specific problem. Your local representative or senator probably still has to listen to you, because if they make too many people annoyed, they'll be out of office. You can't mandate election wins on every election. You can mandate them on some and get away with it, but you can't mandate it on every election. Sometimes the votes are relatively honest, and you have to abide by that. So, you're the paycheck, man. Write the letters. But the national parties are very, very big. Another part is the media. See, the media is not beholden to us in any way, shape, or form. And the media is largely controlled by a very few people who have a very specific globalist perspective and are also not accountable to you. But they control the vast majority of the information that you have access to, especially as the internet, which is a public square, it's a public utility, especially as the internet gets more and more controlled. You can be removed from the internet. No hosting, no Dropbox, no banking, if you don't toe the line, if you don't have the right views. So the media, there's some very specific issues with the media that we'll get to when we start talking about the boxes. That's the elephant number 2. Elephant number 3 has to do with futility. there's a programmed sense of futility or disconnection. This is very specifically programmed in, okay? That if you do write a letter, it doesn't matter. That if you do this, it doesn't matter. If you do that, it doesn't matter. That there's someone who will negate whatever you do. There's a sense of futility that is programmed in. We're not taught in schools, public mandate schools, we are not taught that we as individuals are the sovereign basis of the government and that the government operates at our pleasure. Okay? We are not taught this. We are taught futility and compliance. It's an elephant. The public education system, how it's handled, how it influenced people, the years and years, the decade plus of brainwashing. It is an elephant in the room. Now, a man, a black man in fact, once said a very famous thing about the freedom, liberty rests on 4 boxes. Now, these boxes are not a specific order, okay, remember that, but it's the soapbox, the cartridge or the jury box, the voting box, and the cartridge box. Now, again, no specific order, okay? The soapbox is important. It is a fundamental part of your liberty. And we are arguing, debating, trying to pick each other to pieces about what qualifies as censorship and what doesn't, and what is private rights by entities that have no legal accountability to the citizenry versus free speech, and whether free speech is hate speech, and whether free speech is violence, and we're picking apart a bunch of shit here. And the basic fact is the soapbox doesn't work if you're restricted from the town square, from the commons, if you can't use it. And it doesn't work if there's no accountability, no responsibility to make sure that you have access to that fundamental freedom. The jury box has been removed a long time ago. It's funny because one of my former friends who was big on this quote used to talk about it all the time, but he also is very opposed to jury nullification. He says it's a nuclear option that is always bad. It's just sometimes the least bad answer, but it's always bad. And jury education and such is looked down on. And you don't have the ability to use the jury box to influence justice. That has been removed as much as possible over the past century and a half, from American discourse and knowledge. Like, you don't even know what you can do as a jury member. You actually have a fair amount of power, governmental power. That's on purpose. All right, the jury box has been nullified, especially in regards to the elephants, because the elephants you have no way to bring them to court. You cannot bring the media conglomerates to court for misinformation, for censorship, for disinformation. You cannot bring them to court. You cannot use the jury box. You cannot bring the national parties to court. There's no way, there's no mechanism for you to say, hey, you've robbed me of my sovereign citizenship. Okay, and I don't mean sovereign citizen conspiracy theories. I just mean the sovereignty of the citizen as the fundamental basis of government. You have robbed me of that by removing all ability for my local party, my local committee to have any power. I cannot influence because I'm not part of the national party. There's no way to bring that to court. There's no way to use the jury box, okay? You cannot use the jury box against the public education system either. It's not there. The jury box has been removed. Now, that leaves you, the soapbox is in free fall, all right? There's debate about that. You can have influence, you can use it, but you can't beat the media, because the media is, you get up on the soapbox and they just drape you in sound insulating foam and do their own speech. The ballot box. Well, how does the ballot box actually work when it comes to public education? It doesn't, because all you ever get to vote on is tax increases. You can vote on school board members, but you don't get to vote on the fundamental structure, the ideologies being instilled. You don't get to vote on any of that. You don't have access to that. And as far as the ballot box goes, it's not structured properly for what we need at this moment in history. Okay, it doesn't seem to work very well. You can't vote to restrict corporate media. It's not accessible to, it's not accountable to the electorate as an electorate. Okay? 3 elephants in the room. All right? National party structure is not amenable to changes through vote. Okay? It's really not. The only level to which they care about any opposing viewpoint is whether or not it's going to lose a seat in Congress. You have no influence over the national party structure. That's self-evident. Look at the past 12 years. There's no way to escape knowledge of that. There is no accountability for the media. Globalist, minority-owned, anti-competitive media cartel. They have no accountability at the election box. You can't get them with the jury box. You can't get them with the ballot box. You cannot control, influence, or change. There's a cartridge box. And that's a very dangerous thing to talk about because the media owns the soapbox. So to get up on your soapbox and talk about the cartridge box will quite often get you censored, which is why I'm going to do this in a kind of a sideways fashion, right? But the cartridge box isn't just cartridges, okay? It includes a whole vast panoply of methods of physical resistance. There's strikes. Okay, strikes are a very big one. You know, there's lots of ways that don't involve actually using powder and lead, okay? But the cartridge box is a very specific thing, and it's the only thing to which otherwise unaccountable groups are universally accountable. And I just want people to consider that. We're in a situation, this needs to be fixed, this must be fixed, or the cartridge box is going to happen. Okay, I'm not saying I'm going to do it. I'm not saying you're going to do it. I'm just saying it's going to happen. There's no way to avoid it. You have many groups, okay, like my 3 elephants, who are not accountable to any of the other boxes. That leaves only the cartridge box. You need to either make them accountable, hold them accountable, put reins on them, figure out a structure that works, figure out a way for the citizenry to be sovereign over the media, the national party structure, whatever, or that box, that cartridge box, is going to get opened by somebody somewhere, and it's going to be a lot of somebodies and a lot of somewheres, okay? It's going to be a trickle and then a flood. That's just, you can't even an absolutely 100% information controlled media cannot stop that from happening. All right? It didn't work in the Soviet Union either. State-controlled media did not prevent dissent. And that dissent eventually toppled governments multiple times. I'm not advocating. I'm warning that this is a historical fact. It's almost a historical law. It's almost a law of nature. You can't avoid this. There has to be some accountability to those other boxes. And the boxes are a metaphor. It's not the universal truth, okay? This one dude who said that didn't come up with some universal truth, and this is the only thing, and these are the only 4 things. It's a description. It's a map of a territory. And it's an imperfect map, but it's very useful to understand, and it's fairly accurate, okay? There is no accountability to any of the other 3 boxes by things that control large segments of our society and our freedoms, our liberties, our capabilities, our ability to live our lives. This government is supposed to be based on the sovereignty of the electorate, okay? We are what permits government to operate. That doesn't mean I have to win every election. It doesn't. I understand people win, lose. There's compromise. Not the progressive definition of compromise. The progressive definition of compromise is I give up nothing, you give up more and more and more. I get that. That's a problem. But actual compromise. I get that the electorate working has to come up with stuff that works. It's why we have a constitution to prevent the electorate from actually taking away people's liberties, which is basically all that we get at this point. Whew. We do not get to operate as a nation where the electorate has any influence at all when it comes to some of these elephants, okay? The education system is a little harder to delve into. It's going to require different videos, okay? And it's a wide open space right now because one of the silver linings of the lockdowns is that a lot of people are freeing up their education and accessing different materials. And they're going to lock that down. They're going to absolutely try to mandate what you can and can't do in your homeschooling. But they haven't done it yet. There's another chance for a little bit of freedom there. But the federal party system, the national parties, toast, man. I mean, we're toast. They're not accountable to us. If you get enough of us together and we do enough primary, like kicking the establishment out of the primaries, you can get a little bit of influence, all right? The Republicans have done that a little bit, but not very much. Not enough to even pass the Hearing Protection Act, all right? And the media, the media, you don't understand if you don't understand, but the media is a huge problem. It's a massive, massive problem. And it is a conglomerate operated by a small number. 98% of your media at this point, used to be 90%, 98% of the actual media, published media at this point, is controlled by fewer than a dozen corporations. I mean, there are a couple dozen people in the world that control all of it. I think that the majority, over 60% of the media in the U.S., comes down to 6 people basically in control. And that is just no, that's no good. And they're not accountable to you in any way, shape, or form. And there's a cartridge box. And it's just laying there. Something's going to happen. Oh, man. The game is so much fun right now. It's so much fun right now. To be able to live in times of such influence is actually a blessing. So, stay sideways. And, Viva la revolution.